So how are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good, doing better.
Good, good. Better
I
is
feel
good.
like it's been a minute since I've seen you.
It probably has been, what, 6 months or something?
Something like that, yeah. Wait, well, I saw you back in June, right? Is that 6 months?
It's close to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, close enough, yeah. But how was the Halloween party?
Oh, it was great. It was
Nice.
fine. Um, Piper did a really good job. She carved her own. She drew a pumpkin and carved it herself. It was pretty awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I got most of what I needed to get done for today, and I was like, I signed up for this Uber thing, so let me try it out. So I went to drive Uber for the first time.
Oh,
And
right on.
I picked up two different groups of people that were going to separate parties, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like the second group was like, "Yeah, going to a party tonight because Halloween's on Thursday." So it's like
Right.
most people won't be going to party just for that to go back to work the next day.
Absolutely.
Cool. But
Yeah, I actually had to take a couple Ubers myself not too long ago.
oh, you did?
I had to get my car fixed. So,
What
and it was
happened?
super convenient. It was really nice. It crapped out on me on the way to work. So it was like
Mm,
3 in the morning, and I had to get a tow truck to come, and then I had to get an
ooh.
Uber from the place I got it repaired.
Yeah. Was that your first time riding Uber?
It, not my first time, but it's been a long time since I've had to.
Gotcha.
So.
Cool. Well, I guess you're probably wondering why why I've got you on here or what the heck I'm trying to do.
What the heck are you trying to do?
Well, I mean, I know you. I don't know if you remember, but I've talked about before when we were working together about like just having dialogue like this in open form. Everybody seems to be doing podcasts, but um, I thought this would be a good way to highlight people that I know and just kind of get a sense of like who they are and what their background is. Like basically, how did you get to where you're at now? And being able to share that with people would probably help them navigate whatever they're going through in life.
Interesting idea. I like that.
So I've been starting the conversations in this way. Who do you say you are?
I don't. I admit to nothing. No,
Gotcha.
it's such a it's such a changing and ephemeral concept. Um, Although it's funny, it reminds me of a joke I
Hmm.
heard not too long ago. A man is traveling in India, and he's trying to find a guru to find enlightenment.
Hmm.
And he meets up with this guy, and he says, I really need to tell me how to achieve enlightenment. And the guru says, look, all you need to do is sit down in front of a mirror and ask yourself, who am I? Over and over again. Who am I? Who am I? Who am
Hmm.
I? Over and over again, an hour every day, and you will guaranteed achieve enlightenment. And this guy's like, that okay, yeah, that seems a little too easy. So he keeps walking, and he meets another guru. He says, I can absolutely lead you to enlightenment, but you have to give up all your worldly possessions
Hmm.
and come live with me at my ashram, and I'll put you in charge of the barn where I keep my cows, and you'll take care of the cows. It's like, okay, well, okay, yeah, hard work. That sounds good. I'll try that.
Yeah.
So he's shoveling cow poop, and he's cleaning the barns out, and he does this faithfully. He follows all the instructions. He does it for 5 years, and he's finally like, okay, look, I don't think I'm enlightened yet, but I'm ready. What do I have to do? He said, okay, you've worked with me for 5 years. All you have to do is sit down in front of a mirror and ask yourself, who am I, over and over and over for an hour, and you're guaranteed to achieve enlightenment. And he's like, what? The first guy I talked to said that very same thing. Why have I been shoveling cow poop for 5 years? And the guy says, well, that's easy. It's because you're stupid.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So, who do I say that I am? It's a funny question. I'll tell you, I recently had a conversation at work about where I wanted to go in the company, and I've never actually had anyone ask me that before, because I have essentially just followed the path that was set in front of me. I take the opportunities as they come up, and I end up following the weird journey that I've taken to get to where I'm at. Part of me thinks that the path of least resistance is the most natural approach to whatever it is that's going on. Part of me thinks that I'm just lazy. It might be both. I don't know.
Why do you say that?
Why do I say which part? That I'm lazy, or the path of least resistance?
Right. So, I mean, start with the path of least resistance. Is that from past experience, or?
It's probably a philosophical justification for my laziness.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I was reading a book not too long ago that had just kind of a blurb about this idea that in all of nature, everything follows the path of least resistance. The way that trees grow, the way that water moves, the way that animals hunt, we're always trying to be as efficient as possible. Right. What that actually means is we do the easiest thing that we can in the context that we've set for ourselves.
Right.
So if you find it unacceptable to lie in bed all day, what's the next easiest thing that you can do? So you essentially set yourself a framework to live within, and you consistently or theoretically you consistently will follow that path given the constraints that you've already set for yourself. So essentially you establish your own constraints either by choice or by habit or by accepting other people's choices, and then you experience that. You make choices about your actions based within that framework.
That makes sense.
And the more self-conscious, more self-aware that you are about how that framework is established, the more you can take conscious control over it, I suppose. Like doing the dishes.
Yeah.
I don't always do the dishes at night because I've established a framework for myself that it's not a must. It's not the most significant thing that I can do with my time, and sometimes it's tired, and I'll do it in the morning.
Right.
So absolutely, path of least resistance. If it was something that I couldn't relax unless I took care of it, that then would be my new path of least resistance.
Gotcha. Hey, give me 1 second. Was there a doorbell on your side or was that on my side?
That was my side.
Okay, gotcha.
My wife and daughter came home, and she loves to ring the doorbell, even though she can go right in the door.
Gotcha.
She's not actually locked out. She can come in.
I didn't know if it was me because I thought I heard something earlier, and I was like, maybe I need to run and check before somebody's just hanging out at the door. Well, that's hilarious.
She may barge in here at some point to introduce herself, but
cool. So maybe I should have just asked a better question at the start. So
I think it's a great question. It's just,
okay. Well, I mean, I guess it kind of seems like it's a little loaded. Like,
oh, absolutely. I think I'm very cautious about being too rigid with my own identity, only because I know that it's potentially fluid, and it's inevitably fluid.
Right.
And
Or
things like I'm not the job that I have. I'm not my
right.
hobbies. I'm not my personality. I'm something completely separate from that. And there may not be words to describe what it is. I don't know.
Got you. So I mean, okay, so maybe help me work back a little bit. So take me from where you are now and kind of like how you got there.
Okay. Um, well, working backwards is interesting. So um, I am in a situation where I don't have any roots. I've been, for the last, 5, maybe 6 years, I've been renting houses, moving from job to job. I haven't moved that much, but I know people can end up moving every 6 months. But
Hmm.
um, I left my home in Minnesota to come down to Louisiana, and then from Louisiana I moved to Georgia, just following my work.
Right.
Um, I don't think that my wife and I owned a house in Minnesota, but we never really. Um, it's probably the place that we have the deepest roots, but it's still that sense of people calling like, oh, this is my home, this is where I'm from. I
Yeah.
don't have a place where I'm from really anymore.
Okay.
Uh,
What was it before like this little transition in Minnesota?
I was in Minnesota for a good 10 years.
Okay.
And before that, I was in, well, maybe even more than that, 2002. Yeah, so 14 years, is thereabouts. And
Mhm.
before that, I grew up in upstate New York. So I lived
Okay.
in New York for my adolescence through to age 18, and then I went to school in Minnesota.
Right.
So that's kind of how I ended up um, in the Midwest.
Got you. I
I went
guess.
to school thinking I was going to go into physics.
Hmm.
At least that was the idea. And for a while, I didn't actually really want to go to college.
Hmm.
It was a weird thing to think about. I had some smarter friends than me. Like, that's ridiculous. You absolutely need to do that. But I didn't. It wasn't necessarily something that I assumed that I would do. But man, it was absolutely. Just looking back on it now, it was absolutely a silly thing to even consider. Um, I
What's
think
that?
I was entertaining kind of a radical contrarian phase.
Hmm.
I didn't want to be led. I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to make my own path or whatever that meant.
Right.
But looking at it in hindsight, that given the opportunity to do it, it was a no-brainer. It was absolutely something I should have done.
Hmm.
But I intended to go into physics. I didn't do that at all. I went into music.
Yeah.
So I was a musician for 10 years in the Minneapolis area. I did a lot of teaching. I did a lot of performing. Um, and then I ended up taking a temp job. I'll take a couple things here and there. I worked as a used car salesman for a little while. Yeah, that was interesting. And then I took a job. It was supposed to be 6 weeks, just over the winter, as
Hmm.
a training coordinator for a project on a nuclear plant.
Hmm.
And it was like my second or third day, and the project manager said, we're going to need you to stay on for the rest of the project. And I said, well, how long is that? And it's like, oh, 2 years. So I went from a 6-week job to a 2-year job.
Yeah.
And at that point, everyone who I was involved with working there, they're all like, look, this industry is going to be amazing for you. You can take this as far as you want to take it.
Hmm.
So it was absolutely just this happy accident that that I got involved. And I was living in a town that had a nuclear plant. That's pretty rare.
Hmm.
So then I just worked my way through all these different administrative things and some technical stuff and procedure writing. I got a procedure writing certification for nuclear procedures. And then I ended up in the welding department in Louisiana,
Hmm.
kind of became a welding engineer with just essentially just picking up, learning the things that I needed to know to do the job in front of me.
Right.
And that's always been my really advantage that I've had, is that I really enjoy learning new things. And so I'm faced with a task. I'm going to put everything I've got into trying to figure out how to make it work, or how
Right.
to understand how to do it. And so it was just, people would just set problems in front of me and I would just keep going.
Mhm.
That's the condensed version of how I ended up. Yeah.
Gotcha. But let's see. So I mean, like out of all those, like growing up, like going from New York to Minneapolis, like, is there nothing within like that first 18 years of your life that you feel like you're grounded to? Or I mean, you've already spent more like close to that amount of time outside of your childhood, to where I guess the roots, like you said, don't really apply as much anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels. I didn't really feel connected to that place
Okay.
particularly. I went back with my family last Christmas,
Hmm.
for a week or so, and it was nice to see. My parents are still there. It was nice to visit, but there's no connection there, and
Gotcha.
I think about that, and it was kind of I think isolated is too strong a word, but it was a very kind of independent childhood that I had. We visited our cousins and our
Hmm.
aunts and uncles and stuff, and so the extended family was there, but it
Yeah.
was never. Nobody was local, so
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't have family close
So
beyond my parents.
okay.
My brother and sister are a lot older than I am,
Hmm.
so they took off and had their own lives too.
Mm.
Um,
So it's almost like you grew up as an own, like, even though you have siblings, it's almost like you grew up like an only child. So you
very
just had to like
Yeah,
figure things out with the people around you, and then whenever you guys get together for like family get-togethers, it's like, oh, okay, that's cousin so and so. This, like, by the time you get to the end of the line, it's like, what's your name again?
yeah. I mean, I guess so. It's not like I call up my cousins and say, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?"
Right,
That's
right.
not really part of how I proceed through the world. And I have made some lifelong friends that I know will follow me wherever I go.
Mhm.
Um, but it's the same thing. I might not see them for years.
Right. Or 6 months.
Or 6 months. Yeah, very true. Very true.
Gotcha.
And
But
I know it's some people have a very different experience with that.
mhm.
I was thinking about one colleague that I worked with in Louisiana, and he's getting job offers to go other places, and he really has to look at those seriously because he may not have a local job right now. I think he's commuting to Houston
Mhm.
from, it's like a 3-hour drive, because he really just absolutely does not want to leave home.
Yeah.
He's got his family, his land, his house. It's just he doesn't ever want to leave.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I guess I've never felt that. So
Yeah. So I mean, like, with not feeling those deep roots, is that something that you're trying to get back to now, like having a family of your own, or are you trying to build your own roots, or just like teach your child, hey, just kind of go with the flow of what life brings to you, like don't get hung
yeah,
up on the small stuff.
I think I've tried to kind of establish the idea in my own mind that that the that your roots and your home is not tied to a particular place,
Mm.
or it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Um, I mean that I would love for the next 10 years of our lives to be traveling all over and seeing the world and going different places, and not worrying about whether or not there's a home, there's like a physical place that we have to go back to,
Mm.
that we can float, as it were.
Gotcha.
So
Makes
yeah,
sense.
I think that seems appealing to me.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, with where you're at now, working in engineering, and the new opportunity that's kind of presented itself, is that something that you look forward to, or kind of like a happy surprise?
It was another one of those things that just kind of worked out really well. I'd been thinking about doing a project management certification for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, since I got into the industry, because I worked with a really excellent project manager,
Mm-hmm.
really inspiring, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like an awesome thing to do.
Right.
The combination of leadership and motivation and technical and business knowledge, just seeing all these different parts come together and having a strong team. Yeah, he was awesome and super inspiring.
Yeah.
And so I had thought about pursuing this thing for a really long time, and I've been putting it off and putting it off, just generally because it's kind of spendy to go through all the process of getting certified and taking the test and doing all the studying and all the stuff. But it worked out that my wife has one of her degrees from a university in Vermont, and they sent us an email that's like, hey, we've got this new online program we're starting for the first time, and it's 50% off. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I can't turn that down. That's awesome.
Right.
You know, I'd like you to meet my friend Asher.
Hi.
Hey, Pepper.
Are you getting ready for bed?
Yeah.
Awesome. Mwah.
I hope you have a nice night.
Thank you. I will.
I love you.
I'll see you in the morning, okay?
Mhm.
I love you.
I can't wait for
Breakfast?
Yeah.
Oh, weekend. Yes, I can't wait for the weekend. It's the weekend. Awesome.
I hope we have lunch with my friend tomorrow.
Yeah, it's going to be great. All right, good night, y'all. That's my daughter. She's awesome.
Cool. That's what's up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been the best thing that's happened to me for sure. And I think the other I feel like we've been really successful parents, I think, so far.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she has her struggles, we have our struggles and all this stuff, but I think we've been able to spend a lot of time kind of really concentrating on the kind of parents that we want to be, and having the emotional space to ensure that we show up for that. I'm proud of that.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's something I
That's
like to strive. What's that?
That's definitely a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I'd like to strive towards.
Yeah. I'm also super lucky that my wife has a background in child development and psychological development, because had I not known about some of the things that she enlightened me to, it's a very different experience. You know, remembering that, you know, a child's emotional development it takes a long time. We're not fully, our brains aren't fully formed until we're like 25.
Right.
So I see parents and interacting with their kids, and it's like the communication is technically happening, but there's actually no communication happening. You know, kids in distress and freaking out about something, or is tired or hungry, and the parents are exhausted and they're shouting at their kids. And it's, it's painful to watch that just kind of breakdown of human interaction.
That's a good point. I feel like I've been looking into that a lot more recently, kind of dealing with the DISC assessment. A lot of the people that I talk to kind of talk about this assessment because it's a good way to understand how people communicate differently. And a lot of times we just think that just because you speak the same language, say English, that things will be understood. But for us working on a construction site with like people from different backgrounds, and especially like craft guys or people from other countries, like you quickly notice that like English isn't the same English. And it's like, wait, you got to run that word back by me again. Like,
and even beyond just the words, the expectations and the nonverbal communication and the implications or insinuations of all that stuff. It's very complicated. and we think that we've expressed information, and
Right.
it absolutely has not been. It's not been understood, and we forget. I think one of the big things is we forget what we know,
Mm.
and we assume that the person we're talking to also knows what we know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It. What's funny is that I've been reading this book. It's like a daily motivational book. Just like every day you have today's date, a topic, and then it has like a little short story. And today was
Yeah.
talking about basically parents teaching their kids, and it tells you this short story where this dad gets frustrated at his child that's maybe like 10 or 12, and he's just like, why don't you just grow up? And then there's like a
Yeah.
pause. It's like there's a moment of pause, and then the little kid, he's just like bawling. He like finally like clears his eyes or whatnot. He's like, I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to grow up. Like, what do you want from me? And it's just like in that moment of frustration, that just like the dad's getting mad because the kid's not doing what he wants him to do, but then like the kid's
Yeah.
getting mad because he can't figure out how to do what his dad wants him to do. And it just
It's
talked
like
about, yeah,
it's like shouting at a plant.
yeah.
Like it's not going to make it go faster.
But I mean, to that point, I think somebody said, I'm sure they've done a study on it where like people do shout at plants like in a controlled environment, and they see like how that's going to affect its growth, and then versus playing like classical music to it, or
Oh
like
yeah, I've heard about
death
that.
metal or something like that. And it's like you really got to be careful about what you feed a plant. And it's like if that happens to a plant, like how much more a child. And like for me, I like it's strange kind of always seeing it from the outside looking in, and it's I try to just keep my mouth closed when it comes to people and their kids, because I was like, I don't have kids, so let me not put in my 2 cents. But
Yeah.
if I can be of any help, like I try to help. But otherwise it's like, hey, like
People get really defensive
mm,
about how they raise their kids, and there is very little training or education available. Nobody
right,
knows what they're doing.
right,
Nobody
right,
knows. They justify their own childhood by what their parents did,
mm,
and that becomes the standard. This is how you raise kids.
right.
I'm doing it how my parents did it, and I think, man, well, you turned out a little messed up. You want to try something else?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's that kind of like trial and error where it's like some some things work out where you're like, okay, this happened to me, maybe I don't do that. But I heard someone say like there's certain things that you don't want to take away from your kid to where
Right.
like they're able to be formed. But recently it seems like a lot of people that have had they've kind of basically had the struggles and like the danger taken away from them. It seems like it's turned into this like you have over coddled children where like as soon as you're met with like an aggression or something, you're like, oh geez, I don't know what to do, like I don't like this. And it's like, well, the majority of the world is, it's like that's a rough place, and if you're not prepared for it, you're going to be in bad shape.
Yeah. That's definitely a theme people have discussed at length.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
But
there's an emotional resilience that has to be learned really early on,
mm,
and there's probably no silver bullet to do it, but there
yeah,
are certainly ways to destroy someone's emotional resilience early
oh yeah,
on.
yeah. I feel like I've, so, I've somewhat seen that, and it's just a scary thing because I mean you have I don't I don't like to pull stats, and I don't know any off my mind, but it's like sometimes you have the people that are like systematically broken and they never recover, but then you have some people that are like very strong-willed, and like although somebody may be like trying to break them at every step of the way, they find a way to kind of like break out and just be like this ends with me
Sure,
type deal.
sure. Yeah, and Absolutely. That's a legitimate, I guess you'd call it a trait.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's something that you necessarily learn. The term grit gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
I think it can get misapplied in some contexts, maybe.
Hmm. It's,
Um,
I mean, to that same point, I originally, when I had the idea for the podcast, I wanted to ask something along the lines of like hype and hustle, like hustle being like your daily work, like what it takes to just like in and out when you clock in, clock out, like
mm,
the thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about, just like that everyday work. And I
yeah.
asked it to one of my friends that I recorded one of the first few episodes with. And when I said hustle, he was like, well, in my world as a barber, like whenever you hustle, it kind of means like you're taking the shortcut. So like
Mm,
you could be hustling. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. So maybe maybe I need to drop that altogether, because it's like if you call
yeah.
it like hustle, grit, grinding, like work, whatever, it's like it seems that there's a certain group of people that maybe use that terminology to like for motivation or something. It's like, hey, I'm on my hustle, I'm on my grind, I'm on like on my
Yeah.
daily work. Other people, they're doing the same thing, but they're not necessarily saying it. It's like
Absolutely.
yourself, you just get up and you go to work because it's like that's what you know to do. That's the expectation, and you say, I'm gonna meet my expectations, and
Right.
maybe I don't need to announce it to the world like, hey, look, let me take a picture. I'm at work. Hey, look,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like
I mean,
no,
to
you
work.
can't.
No.
It's like you're not in the environment that allows you to do that, because like it's very regimented, and it's like, okay, you don't just have the duty to yourself and your family, but the people that you're essentially supporting. And like once you're not there, like those people suffer in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose that's true. There's there there's a concept that bounces around my head about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation,
Mhm.
and I think that there are it's an interesting distinction to make. I think people talk about like what would you do if either like no one was watching you, or what do you do, like that kind of I guess in an ethical framework, like what are you willing to do or not willing to do, even if there's no chance that you'll ever get caught.
Right.
There's kind of an intrinsic concept, and then there's also just folks who are doing making whatever decisions, or doing whatever behaviors it is purely for the consequence, the reward of whatever it is.
Right. Right.
And it could be money, it could be respect, it could be taking care of your family, whatever it is. It's not saying that one is better or worse,
Yeah.
um, but understanding kind of what's driving you, what does get you going and motivated every day.
Right. Was that something difficult for you to find, or have you always
it
kind of had something to push you?
it wasn't after I had a kid.
Mm.
um, there's there's a really big aspect of my perspective that looks at kind of the future of humanity that I'm
Mm.
participating in, and being a parent being the parent that I want to be is part of that. You
Mm.
know, I have this 1 in 8 billionth percentage responsibility
Mhm.
to kind of raise the standard, or at least be better than my parents were,
Yeah.
uh, just to keep everything moving. And there's no guarantee that anything that I do is going to matter. Um, but I'd like to think that we're all interconnected enough that the impacts are there, even if I never see them.
Mhm.
So I tend to keep that in mind,
Yeah.
even though it's kind of it's fundamentally abstract. I mean, at some point the sun's going to expand and fry the planet. But at least while I'm here, you know,
Yeah.
maybe it's just a biological imperative, or maybe it's just a philosophical exercise. I don't know.
Got you. But I mean, that's a good point that you make, that distinction, that although I guess as many people like to call it like an apocalypse or some like um disaster event happens, like
Yeah.
although that could happen, that's not where your focus goes, and you don't want,
How
just want
can
to
it?
throw,
I mean,
yeah, because it's like in your life you have immediate things that you need to tend to, and you understand the importance of those.
right. And there are long-term consequences for all our decisions that we may never know.
Yeah.
Certainly getting hung up on those. I only really talk about, that kind of the chance that humanity could collapse entirely, kind of tongue in cheek, only in that
Hmm.
it's probably the worst thing that could happen to us.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot more pressing concerns than whether the next asteroid's going to take us out or not.
Right. Right. It's like, well, I guess we got hit, so let's figure out what to do from here.
I mean,
But
if you ask a geologist, they'll tell you we're due for another mass extinction.
mhm.
So that's interesting.
Is, I don't know. Maybe there's some people, maybe I may need to work up the nerve to talk to them, because it's did you use Facebook back in the day when it was for college students, or like before it
Um,
became like big to the public, or MySpace even?
when did I start? Probably, I want to say 10 or 12 years ago, I got my account started,
Okay.
but I don't use it very much at all.
Got you.
I haven't opened that app in a year.
Okay. Well, you're not missing out on too much, but the one reason I brought that out, well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Like
Yeah.
perspective and whatnot is all relative. But the reason I brought that up is because every now and then, especially I think it was MySpace back in high school or middle school, was that it was a way for you to personalize your information and kind of put it out there. And then every now and then you would get some random ad where it'd be like, oh, if you like you've got to pick between two people, like who do you like, or who do you think's more attractive? Because like the way they goat you into it is like, oh, somebody said that they ranked you on the scale, so you're like, oh, I wonder who voted me. But anyways,
Oh,
like one of those things would be like, okay, click this to figure out the day you're going to die. And
oh yeah.
I don't want anything to do with that. Like, if it happens, let it happen. But like, I don't know how well I would respond to saying, okay, like the date is this, like you got 5 years or you got 10 years or whatnot. It's like, for some people that would like really push them. And it goes back to
Yeah.
what you said about the extrinsic motivations versus intrinsic.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just that if you don't understand what really drives you, then you can get hung up on the small things that don't really matter.
Yeah. I came across I don't know if you're familiar with Viktor Frankl.
I've heard the name, but I don't think I've read his like specific material.
He was a psychotherapist who was also in Auschwitz, and he survived.
That's where I know him from. Right,
Yeah.
right.
So he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he talked about how important it is that we create meaning, and it's kind of the primary motivator for human accomplishment is this idea that we create the meaning and
Right.
of our lives and our actions and all this stuff. And one of the things that stuck with me was his a quote about living your life as though you've already lived it once and failed, and this is your second chance.
Mm.
And yeah, that's stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's heavy. It's a heavy thing to think about. But we often engage in that kind of like, oh man, if I could go back and do it again, this is what I would do. And
Mm.
if we really admit it to ourselves, we already know.
Right.
We already know what we do is either life affirming or not. We
Right.
already have
Right.
an intuitive sense, but to be assessing every moment or every conversation or every action that we're doing on a daily basis. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
To have the emotional resilience, the emotional fortitude to be able to approach it in that level.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy. But then I also read about a guy, James Altucher, comes up, and he talks about only focusing on improving 1% every day.
Mm-hmm.
And then improving 1% every day compounds enormously very quickly. And that was his whole point. Like, you don't need to change your entire life in one go. You don't need to make a grand revolution, because it's probably not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But, you balance those two things and see where you end up, I guess.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to bring up is that I know you have the nickname, the Red Wizard. Can you tell me the story behind that?
It happened purely by accident. I know you and I were having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I was thinking about it, but there's a really old video game called Gauntlet, and it had 4 characters. It was like a elf, a barbarian, a Valkyrie, and a wizard. And it was one of an early multiplayer arcade game, where it's essentially just a dungeon crawler or whatever. And the notifications or the alerts are this disembodied voice saying like, "Oh, Red Wizard needs food badly." And so for some reason I just had this humorous thing in the back of my head. And so I was just going to get up and get some food. And for some reason I just said that.
Gotcha.
Everybody kind of leapt on it like, "Oh yeah, Red Wizard."
Gotcha.
So,
because you're redheaded.
With me. It was purely by silly chance.
Gotcha. So
which
this is a rare nickname. But I mean this is a rare case where you nicknamed yourself.
Because I guess I did. I certainly didn't mean to. I was not like, "Hey, this should be my nickname."
Right. Because I've seen somebody try that before. That was there a few years before you, and everybody's like, "No, we're gonna give you a nickname. Don't worry." It's like, no, we're not gonna use that.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I like that. You keeping everything like short and succinct. Has this been of any value to you?
It's always fun to get an opportunity to reflect and talk about yourself, I guess.
Gotcha. I mean that's kind of why I wanted to reach out to you, and that's why I appreciate speaking with you, because you seem very reflective, and I just see that.
10 years ago, I would have really valued conversations like this a lot, because I spent a lot of my life just completely uncertain, having no idea what I needed to do or how I needed to get there. And it was a very slow process of just accepting that nobody knows.
Right. That's a scary thought for me. Initially it was, but then it's like, okay, it's kind of comforting. So whenever somebody seems so certain about something, it's like, well, maybe just let them have that certainty, but not take it on to myself.
As a younger musician, that was an exceptionally challenging thing to take on, because it always seemed like, when I was like 15, working really hard at being a musician, and I had to, it was one of those things where I had to essentially dedicate a huge amount of time to this one particular goal. And I really had no idea whether it was a worthy goal or something that I really wanted to do, but it was something I was good at. And that was kind of the only attraction that I had. Hey, there's this thing that I'm good at. Let's see what happens.
Right.
And consistently, I would come across people who, started 3 years earlier than me, or, oh, I knew this is what I wanted to do with my life since I was 8. And so when you've got something that takes so much dedication and so much energy to perfect, you're never going to be, it seems as though you're never going to find yourself in that position of being number one at anything. And that you just have to accept, okay, well, that's the way it is.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time chasing something that I could not achieve. And looking back on it, people had given me advice, which had I taken, I probably would have ended up in a different place. But I couldn't hear it, and that was the big thing. You know, you got all these really wise people saying, "Hey, I really want to help you. I really want you to succeed. I really want to see great things."
Right.
And I had this framework that was so rigid, that was so fixed, that I couldn't see myself anywhere else, and that was a limitation on my imagination. That was my own self-imposed limitations rather than anything else.
Gotcha. So, I mean, and I know you said 10 years ago you could have used this information. Was it, did you just end up having to take the 10 years to kind of figure out, like, okay, this isn't working, let me try something else. This isn't working, let me try that.
And it's when you're putting your energy into something that just doesn't work, it's disheartening on an existential level. Like, what are you contributing? What are you doing? How are you, you know, it can be, for a certain personality type, it can be very challenging. And some people don't seem to be bothered so much by it, or at least they don't let on. You know, a lot of people will not tell you their deepest fears or concerns of their lives, and they're just like, "Oh, I just do my thing, everything's great." And it could be deep down that they're struggling like crazy. They don't know that they don't know what their own self-worth is, or they don't know what if they're going to even make it another 10 years.
That's a good.
So it was a weird journey, and I still sometimes feel a bit of regret in terms of feeling like, had I known more then, I would have been this much farther along in some other new career that I'm not going on.
Gotcha.
It's just a very windy path. At least it has been for me.
Right. And I mean, that's like, you said a couple of things before where you said, had you had the information, it would definitely have helped you. But maybe where you were at the time, I don't know if I'm mixing two things together, so stop me if I am, but where you were at one point in your life, it's like somebody would try to give you advice that would have maybe taken you further, but you just weren't ready to receive that information.
Yeah, I had too much of a commitment to this one particular identity. You know, I had spent so much energy focused in this one direction that I couldn't take the blinders off. I just couldn't hear the advice I was getting. And I think, and there's an arrogance there in assuming, oh, whatever you have to say for me is either not in my best interest, or you just don't know me well enough to be able to guide me, or your information or your experiences aren't relevant to me. It's a tough place to be able to be humble enough to say, okay, I have to assume, one, you're speaking out of altruism. You're telling me something that is valuable in your experience. You want me to succeed. And then two, understand that their perspective on you is very different than your perspective on yourself.
It's a great.
That's tough. Both of those things are very difficult to achieve.
Right.
But they're worth it. I mean.
Yeah. I think they say only maybe like 1% of the world actually does that, like answering those questions about themselves, where everybody else either ponders on them from time to time, but they never like commit to going through the process of like, okay, if this, like, if I'm faced with this, like, how am I going to respond to this versus just going through the motion?
Yeah. That consciousness, that intention is it's a tough muscle to grow. I mean, it really is just a thing you have to practice.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily know you're doing it right.
Right. Well, I mean, I feel like there's, yeah, I'd say in short, yes, I definitely agree with you. And the other thing would be that, like, at least for myself, I've been doing personal development over like the last 3 years, like actually joining a community that does that regularly and having people give you tips on, say, how to record videos or different things like that. And
Sure.
when it comes to the awareness piece and being able to have somebody step you through, okay, like you're still gonna do the work, but like here's A, B, C steps that
Yeah.
like focus right here. Like if we're talking about who you are, like talk about like, okay, maybe where are you from or where, like, what is your name? But like without, for me at least, without having like those guidelines, it makes it difficult to where I may start on something, but then start looking over at what somebody else is doing. I'm like, oh, like my stuff isn't looking like that. So let me just like, if I'm making a sandcastle, let me just like squish it and then like
Yeah.
go and try to do something else. And then next thing I know, oh, this person has like a 3 foot tall castle. And it's like, you need to stop looking over there for one, because that's not
Right.
going to help you anymore. And then for two, you need to really do, like, you need to really spend some time with you to understand like what you're about and what you need to do to like be a better version of yourself.
Yeah. I think there's one thing that I also I try to remind myself is that I tell myself never conform.
Mm.
Um, and I think it reminds me that it's so easy, especially if you're in a community that you see the same people every day.
Yeah.
It's very easy to fall into kind of the social middle ground, as it
Mm.
were. It's
Right.
very easy to end up just, this is how everyone behaves, this is how everyone talks, this is how everyone is.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really important about ensuring that you give yourself the space to just be whatever it is that you want to craft out of yourself.
Gotcha.
That being very vigilant for any conformance for its, and I don't mean that we have to all be nonconformists.
Mm.
It's only that you need to be conscious of what influences you're willing to accept and which ones you're not. And the only way you can do that is if you're actually paying attention to that.
Right.
So you pay attention to what humor people use, what language people use, how casual they are with violence, for instance, or it's very easy to just fall into a very comfortable. And we're I guess we're kind of designed to do that. We're social animals. We're designed to be part of our group, identify ourselves as the in group, and as much as I think there's a lot of safety and benefit from doing that, to know yourself, you can't do that at all.
Right.
You got to give yourself space to understand, what this individual is all about.
Makes sense.
It's complicated. It's messy.
But I think that's a good point to wrap it up on.
Sure.
And I apologize if I'm fading a little bit.
No worries.
I figured it's like I appreciate the information. It's just my sleep schedule has been a little bit strange, but I'm sure you probably identified, like, I don't know why I'm waking up at 3 o'clock or 2 in the morning, but yesterday I was up till midnight trying to get a workout in. I almost forgot about, but I slept in maybe till 5:30 or something like that. But
yeah,
that's regardless of the point.
We're on pretty weird sleep schedules, I know. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I appreciate you being on, Ben.
Absolutely.
Do you want people to find you anywhere, or just
I
next
don't
time
have, I don't have
you don't do
anything
that?
people can find me.
Gotcha. Like if somebody sees you down the street, you just wave at you and be like, "Hey,
I
what's up?"
suppose. Yeah, that works. That works.
Gotcha. Okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks,
Definitely, I would definitely like to do this again if that's
Sure.
okay with you in the future. Maybe like go to one of your stories and like do a deep dive of like what that was like as
Yeah.
you're going through like college and you're talking about like taking the physics class and ultimately like what leads you to make the music decision.
Yeah, absolutely. That
Gotcha.
sounds great.
Appreciate you.
All right. Take it easy, Asher.
You
Good to
too.
see you.
Have a good night.
All right. Good night.